In Milwaukee, Wisconsin, there was once a man whose name carried weight in every bar, pool hall, and corner store, a man they called Peter Blue. His real name was Thomas Elliott, but few people used it. The nickname had become a badge of honor, one that represented charm, class, and mastery of the game of pool. Born on April 3, 1953 in Walnut, Mississippi, Thomas Elliott moved north to Milwaukee with his mother and siblings, searching for new opportunities. It was there, in the heart of the city, that young Thomas began shaping the legend that would follow him for decades. By his teenage years, he was a fixture in local pool halls, quick with a cue, sharper with a smile. His natural talent drew attention, but it was his personality that made him unforgettable. He played not just to win, but to entertain, to connect, to turn competition into community. People remember the way he carried himself, calm, confident, and always immaculately dressed. While others wore casual clothes, Peter Blue stepped into pool halls in suits and polished shoes, a reflection of his pride and self-respect. He looked like success, one friend said. He made you want to be better just by being around him. But Thomas Elliott was more than the legend known across Milwaukee. He was also a devoted father, brother, and friend. To his family, he was simply Dad or Uncle Pete, the one who always showed up with a laugh, a helping hand, or a wise word. His daughter, Dr. LaTanya Jones, remembers him as gentle and grounded, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. He was the person I could tell anything to, she said. No judgment, just love. Even as his name spread through the pool circuit, Thomas remained humble. He never forgot where he came from. His days were simple, filled with work, family gatherings, and the occasional night of cards with friends. He loved crossword puzzles, sports, and good company. Those who knew him best said his quiet demeanor hid a quick wit and a deep compassion for others. Yet behind the calm exterior, there was always an energy, the same determination that had made him a pool champion. Older players began calling him Peter Blue. Peter because it suited his gentlemanly demeanor, and Blue because of his cool, composed nature at the table. The name stuck, and soon everyone in Milwaukee's nightlife knew it. He wasn't just a player, he was a teacher. Dozens of younger players would later recall how Peter taught them the game, often for free, staying long after hours to help them perfect their shot. He saw potential in people others overlooked. He didn't just play pool, one student recalled. He played life with skill, patience, and heart. Peter Blue had lived through the highs and lows of life. He'd known success, faced hardship, and found a way to stand tall through it all. To those who knew him, he was a man of grace, not because of what he had, but because of how he carried himself. By 2015, Peter was 62 and still full of life. He had plans, more games to play, more family moments to enjoy. But on a cold night in December, the rhythm of his life would end abruptly in violence and mystery. The man who once brought joy to so many would be taken from them without warning, and for nearly a decade his family and friends would live with a question that haunts them still. Who killed Peter Blue, and why? That night would change everything. But before the tragedy, there was a life, a vibrant, meaningful life that deserved to be remembered. This is where his story truly begins. Behind the name Peter Blue stood a man who valued family above all else. Thomas Elliott was not just known for his skill in pool halls, but also for his devotion as a father, brother, and friend. Those closest to him remember a man whose heart was as generous as his personality was magnetic. He lived by a code of respect, pride, and love, values he instilled deeply within his children. Thomas had 2 children with Margaret Jenkins, a son, Reginald Jenkins, and a daughter, LaTanya Jones. To them, he was more than just a father. He was their example of strength, kindness, and consistency. Dr. LaTanya often recalls how her father never failed to make her feel supported, no matter what challenges she faced. He was the kind of man who made time for everyone, she once said. He made you feel like you mattered. Even as a public figure in the pool community, Thomas preferred the comfort of home. He often spent evenings surrounded by laughter, conversation, and family meals. His house was a gathering place where everyone felt welcome, from relatives to neighbors who needed a word of advice or a moment of peace. To his siblings, Thomas was the glue that kept the Elliott family close. They admired his quiet confidence and his ability to bring people together without effort. Despite his busy life, he remained deeply connected to his roots, frequently calling his brothers and sisters just to check in. His sense of responsibility ran deep. He had grown up understanding the value of unity, and he carried that with him all his life. Outside of family life, Thomas Elliott had another passion: style. He believed that how you presented yourself said a lot about who you were. It wasn't vanity, it was pride. Whether he was going to dinner, picking up his daughter, or playing a game of pool, Thomas dressed in perfectly tailored suits. His favorite place to shop was Nick Avani's, a popular store in Milwaukee known for fine clothing. The owner, Deb, knew him well and considered him a loyal friend. She often said that Peter never came in without leaving with something sharp and new. Dr. LaTanya remembers teasing her father about how long it took him to get ready. If something started at 7, I'd have to tell him it started at 6:30 just to make sure we'd be on time, she said with a smile. His attention to detail was unmatched. Every hat, tie, and shoe polished to perfection. He looked like he was going to work at a law firm when he picked me up from school, she recalled. Even in casual settings, Peter Blue carried himself with elegance. His presence alone could brighten a room. He walked with quiet authority, not out of arrogance, but because he knew who he was. He had a unique combination of Southern manners and Milwaukee grit, and people respected that. But beneath the charm was a man who valued peace. Thomas often spent his downtime solving crossword puzzles or sitting by the lake, watching the water ripple while reflecting on life. His daughter remembers one of their most meaningful moments together, sitting by the lake after her high school graduation, just talking. "That's when he told me how proud he was," she said. "He wanted me to dream bigger than he ever could." To his grandchildren, he was gentle and patient, always quick with a joke or a smile. To friends, he was dependable, the person you called when life got hard. And to the Milwaukee community, he was an icon, someone who represented success earned the right way. He built a reputation not on fame, but on kindness and authenticity. Even after his passing, the number of people who reached out to share memories of him proved how much he had touched lives far beyond his family circle. Thomas Elliott, the man they called Peter Blue, wasn't just a pool player. He was a father, a role model, and a man of integrity. But as his daughter would later discover, the same city that celebrated his name would also become the place where his life was stolen. December 7, 2015, began like any other winter day in Milwaukee. The air was cold, the streets were quiet, and Thomas Elliott, known to everyone as Peter Blue, had plans to unwind with close friends. To those who saw him that day, he looked as he always did, calm, confident, and sharply dressed. He had spent the afternoon doing what he loved most, shopping for a new suit at Nick Avani's, the store that had become a second home for him. The owner, Deb, later recalled how cheerful he seemed. "He was in good spirits," she said. "He told me he wanted to look nice for the weekend." That evening, Peter went to his longtime girlfriend's house, located on the 4100 block of West Fairmount Avenue, to spend time with friends and relax. It was a typical night, nothing unusual, nothing alarming. The small group gathered around a table, laughing, joking, and playing cards late into the night. Peter had always enjoyed the simple things: good company, good conversation, and a game that kept his mind sharp. Around 11 p.m., the night began to wind down. Peter stood, thanked his friends, and prepared to leave. He had always been mindful of time. He didn't like staying out too late. As he stepped outside into the crisp December air, the neighborhood was still. A thin layer of frost covered the driveways. The streetlights flickered, casting long shadows across the pavement. What happened next would end a life that had touched countless others. As Peter walked toward his car parked in the driveway, two individuals approached him. The details of the next few moments are known only through police reports and what neighbors later told investigators. Gunshots rang out, sharp, sudden, and unmistakable. By the time anyone could react, Thomas Elliott had been shot multiple times. He fell to the ground just steps away from his vehicle. When emergency responders arrived, they found him unresponsive. Despite their efforts, he was pronounced dead at the scene. He was 62 years old. Neighbors described hearing the shots but said they didn't see much. It was dark and the attack had been quick. Witnesses recalled a white four-door Cadillac with tinted windows speeding away moments after the shooting. Investigators later determined that at least 2 suspects were involved. One of them, they believe, ran to the rear passenger seat of the Cadillac before it took off into the night. Police would later say that the suspects appeared to have been waiting, lying in wait for Peter to exit the house. The precision of their timing suggested that this was not a random act of violence. It was targeted. Someone knew Peter's routine and planned the attack carefully. The news spread through Milwaukee within hours. Friends and fellow players from the city's pool community were in disbelief. The man who had taught so many, who had inspired countless others, was gone. "It didn't seem real," said one of his longtime friends. Peter was the kind of person you thought would live forever. He was larger than life. At the time of Peter's death, Milwaukee was experiencing a troubling surge in violent crime. According to the Milwaukee Police Department, there were 147 recorded homicides in 2015, a 69% increase from the year before. Yet, even in a city used to bad news, this case hit differently. Peter Blue wasn't just another statistic. He was loved, respected, and admired for his family. The horror was unimaginable. Dr. LaTanya, his daughter, received the devastating call while she was out of state. She could barely process the words her father, her hero, had been shot. She later said, "It felt like my world stopped. Everything after that moment is a blur." That night, the city lost a man of honor. A daughter lost her father. A family lost its foundation. And a community lost a legend. But for all the shock and grief, one question began to echo through Milwaukee, a question that still haunts everyone who knew him. Why would anyone want to kill Peter Blue? In the days that followed the murder of Thomas Peter Blue Elliott, the entire Milwaukee community was plunged into grief and confusion. People simply couldn't understand how a man so respected, so full of life, could meet such a brutal end. At first there were whispers that maybe it was a robbery gone wrong, that someone had followed him from the store, or that jealousy might have played a part. But as police began piecing together the fragments of that night, it became clear that this was not some random act of violence. Someone had wanted Peter dead. Detectives from the Milwaukee Police Department's Homicide Division were immediately assigned to the case. They interviewed witnesses, canvassed the neighborhood, and reviewed security camera footage from nearby businesses. Unfortunately, most of the cameras in that residential area didn't capture the incident clearly. The only solid lead investigators had was the white Cadillac with tinted windows that had sped away moments after the shooting. Police appealed to the public for information. Flyers were distributed, press conferences were held, and Peter's face was broadcast across local news stations. But the days turned into weeks and the silence grew louder. No one came forward. No suspects were identified. For Peter's family, the uncertainty was unbearable. His daughter, Dr. LaTanya, spoke publicly for the first time a few days after the shooting. Through tears, she said, "My father was a kind man. He didn't deserve this. He spent his life giving to others, and someone took him from us. Please, if you know something, say something." Her words struck the city's heart. News outlets replayed her emotional plea, but still, the phone lines at the police department remained quiet. The case began to stall. Meanwhile, the people who had known Peter best, his friends from the pool hall, fellow business owners, and his community in the fashion and entertainment circles, struggled to make sense of the tragedy. They organized candlelight vigils, shared memories online, and painted murals in his honor. For many, it was their way of keeping his spirit alive, even as questions about his death remained unanswered. What made the case even more painful was Peter's spotless reputation. He wasn't involved in drugs, gambling, or any kind of criminal activity. He was, by all accounts, a good man who had built his success from the ground up. He worked as a tailor, stylist, and fashion designer, known for mentoring young artists and helping people in need. He was the kind of man who'd give you the shirt off his back, one friend said. You couldn't find anyone who didn't like Peter. Still, detectives refused to give up. They examined every possible angle, business connections, personal relationships, and even past conflicts, but no clear motive emerged. Forensic evidence from the crime scene was limited. Shell casings were recovered, but the firearm was never found. As 2016 arrived, the case had gone cold. The city moved forward, but Peter's loved ones couldn't. "It's like he just disappeared and no one can tell us why," LaTanya said in an interview. We wake up every day hoping for a call from detectives, some kind of update. But there's nothing. Even years later, the frustration hasn't faded. The lack of answers feels like an open wound that never heals. The family continues to honor his memory with annual memorial events, sharing his story in hopes that one day someone will come forward. But for now, the murder of Thomas Peter Blue Elliott remains unsolved, a cold case that still haunts Milwaukee streets. It's a story about loss, silence, and the painful truth that sometimes justice doesn't come easily. Yet those who knew Peter refuse to let his name fade. They still speak of him in the present tense, because for them, Peter Blue is more than just a memory. He's a legacy. Nearly a decade has passed since the murder of Thomas Peter Blue Elliott, yet his presence is still deeply felt in Milwaukee. Though the city has grown and changed, those who knew Peter continue to speak his name with warmth, reverence, and a hint of sadness. His death may remain unsolved, but his life, and the legacy he built, continues to shine. For his daughter, Dr. LaTanya Jones, keeping her father's memory alive has become a personal mission. Every year, she organizes trips to destinations she and her father once dreamed of visiting together. On his birthday and the anniversary of his death, she chooses a new place, sometimes tropical, sometimes historic, but always meaningful. On one of these trips, she arranged a special cruise where everyone on board wore blue one night, a tribute to the nickname that defined him, Peter Blue. Dr. LaTanya also leads her family in celebrating Father's Day in a way that honors her father's spirit. The family gathers for dinner, sharing stories, laughing about his meticulous fashion habits and remembering how long he'd take just to get ready for an event. "If something started at 7, LaTanya once laughed, "I had to tell him it started at 6. That's how particular he was about his look. But behind the laughter lies a shared ache, the quiet pain of knowing his killer still walks free. "We can't truly heal until we know who did this," she has said in multiple interviews. "Every time I talk about him, I'm reminded that his story isn't finished." Elliott's legacy, however, extends far beyond his family. Across Milwaukee, people continue to tell stories about the man who changed their lives. Bar owners who once hosted pool tournaments still speak of his sportsmanship. "He'd walk into a place and everyone would light up," one recalled. "He didn't just play pool, he performed. He had style, grace, and charisma. You couldn't take your eyes off him." Others remember his kindness. There were stories of Peter mentoring young players who couldn't afford equipment, paying for meals when someone was struggling, or helping people find work. His influence stretched from the billiards halls to the city's community centers and local charities. Even local business owners, like Deb from Nick Avani's, Peter's favorite store, remember his passion for fashion and self-presentation. "He believed in looking your best because it showed self-respect," she once said. He made everyone around him want to carry themselves better too. The community's admiration became most evident during his funeral. Hundreds attended, many wearing his favorite colors, red, white, and black, while others shared stories about how he had impacted their lives. His body was dressed in a red and white suit, perfectly pressed, just as he would have wanted. It was a farewell marked not only by tears but also by respect and celebration of a life lived fully. Over time, his story reached beyond Milwaukee. His case was featured in Project Cold Case, a nonprofit initiative that partners with universities and journalists to bring attention to unsolved murders. The project's goal is to remind the public that behind every case number is a real person, a father, a friend, a name worth remembering. Students from the University of North Florida's Applied Journalism class worked closely with Project Cold Case to share Peter's story, giving his daughter and family a platform to reach new audiences and reignite public interest. "Telling his story again means people remember him," LaTanya said. "And maybe, just maybe, someone out there will finally come forward." Peter's murder may still be unsolved, but his spirit continues to inspire resilience, love, and determination. For his family, justice isn't just about finding who pulled the trigger. It's about making sure his name is never forgotten. In the words of his daughter spoken during one of her annual memorials, "My father was known for his style, his heart, and his generosity. The world lost something special the night he was taken from us, but as long as I'm alive, Peter Blue will never fade." Nearly 10 years have passed since the night Thomas Peter Blue Elliott was gunned down in a Milwaukee driveway, Yet the answers his family desperately seeks remain elusive. His daughter, Dr. LaTanya Jones, continues her tireless pursuit of justice, refusing to let her father's name fade into another unsolved statistic. For her, every passing year is both a reminder of loss and a renewed call to action. Since 2015, Dr. Jones has worked closely with organizations like Project Cold Case, the Milwaukee Cold Case Unit, and local journalists to keep her father's story alive. She refuses to let time silence his voice. Every time someone shares his story, that's one more chance that the right person might hear it, she said. Somebody out there knows something. They just haven't come forward yet. Dr. Jones maintains regular communication with Detective Lopez and Detective Shima of the Milwaukee Cold Case Unit, who are assigned to her father's case. Despite years of digging, the lack of physical evidence and the absence of witnesses willing to talk have made the investigation incredibly difficult. The suspects were described only vaguely. 2 individuals seen fleeing into a white Cadillac with tinted windows moments after the shooting. Beyond that, the trail has run cold. Still, Dr. Jones refuses to lose hope. My father deserves justice, she says. He was not perfect, but he was loved and he mattered. For her, the fight isn't just about closure, it's about accountability. The idea that someone could take a life so senselessly and continue to live free gnaws at her daily. It fuels her activism, her outreach, and her connection with other families who share similar pain. She's become an advocate for families of unsolved homicide victims, using her voice to speak not only for her father but for hundreds of others silenced by violence. Every December, as the anniversary of his death approaches, Dr. Jones redoubles her efforts. She distributes flyers around Milwaukee, revisits old neighborhoods, and contacts local news outlets. Some years the silence is deafening. Other times she receives small glimmers of hope. A new tip, a social media message, or a community lead that reignites the case for a moment. Each one is a reminder that Peter's story still matters. The pain, however, never leaves. You try to move on, but how can you? She said in a 2022 Crime Stoppers interview. When you lose someone like that, someone who was your foundation, your first protector, you don't just move forward. You carry it with you every single day. Milwaukee has seen hundreds of murders since 2015, but Peter's stands out for its brazenness and its mystery. A well-known man, shot in cold blood in a quiet residential area, with seemingly no robbery, no altercation, and no witnesses willing to come forward. The precision of the attack, the timing, the getaway, suggests it was planned. Police have long believed he may have been targeted due to rumors of financial success or old disputes. But without someone brave enough to speak, the truth remains buried. For Dr. Jones, faith has become her anchor. She prays for strength and believes that in time, truth has a way of surfacing. She often reflects on her father's teachings, to stay strong, to stand up for what's right, and to never back down from a challenge. That's what keeps me going, she says. He wouldn't want me to give up. As the 10-year anniversary of his murder approaches in December 2025, the family plans a public memorial, not only to honor Peter Blue but to demand renewed attention to his case. We want people to remember that justice delayed is not justice denied, LaTanya said. We still believe someone, somewhere, will finally tell the truth. In many ways, the legacy of Peter Blue lives not just in memories but in his daughter's strength, her determination to transform grief into purpose. Her fight has become a voice for every family that's ever waited for justice in silence. It's been almost a decade, she says softly, but I still feel him beside me. Every time I tell his story, it's like he's alive again. And that's why I'll never stop telling it. 10 years have passed, but the pain in Peter Blue's family hasn't faded. His daughter, Dr. LaTanya, still wakes up every day hoping for one phone call, the one that finally tells her who took her father's life. Somewhere out there, someone knows what happened on that cold December night. One confession, one witness, could finally bring peace to a family that's waited far too long. If you know anything about the murder of Thomas Peter Blue Elliott, contact the Milwaukee Police Cold Case Unit. Even the smallest truth could change everything. I'm asking you, don't let his story be forgotten. Share this video, keep his name alive, and help bring justice to a man who was loved by so many. You've been watching Real Crime Pulse, where every story deserves to be heard. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support more cases like this one.